when you bring in distribution and transmission, all the billions of dollars that are required, we're paying for that. So when the government's actually talking about renewables being the lowest cost, they're not the lowest cost, but they are the lowest cost in bringing down emissions. Is that a more accurate way to say it?
I think that's a good way to describe it, because the choice of not bringing down emissions is not one that we can contemplate. I mean, the consequences of climate change is already causing some of these problems we're seeing. It is climate change that to some extent is contributing to more violent storms, more frequent storms. Why are we getting what someone would call a summer heat wave in spring? Climate change is upon us and it's coming faster than we thought. We've got to manage that, right? So when we think about that, the idea of doing it any differently is quite problematic. Nuclear, if it ever exists, isn't going to be there for many, many years. So the way forward is what we're doing, but we also shouldn't pretend that it's going to be cheap or simple.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? I think people expect that it's not going to be cheap or simple, but the pretense and the pretending that it is, I think, is what bothers people. So there is a cost to bringing down emissions. We can't pretend it is otherwise. The other thing here is Chris Bowen noted a number of reports that said that the cost of electricity is coming down. He said 35%. In recent times. Why aren't people seeing that in their retail bills then, even with this subsidy?
Yeah, look, I think there's quite a significant time lag between the physical problems that we're seeing this week in New South Wales, and we saw in New South Wales again in the middle of 2022, the unprecedented energy crisis it was called at the time, and when the cost of dealing with that flow through to the prices that consumers pay. That's one of the jobs of retailers, to smooth out all those fluctuations so we don't see these shorter, sharp prices that we've seen in the last few days. Now, what that means is when we had that unprecedented energy problem in the middle of 2022, the cost of that did flow through in retail prices that went up by 20% and 20% again in 22 and 23. Now, things were already improving by then, but the benefits of the improvements didn't flow through until July of 2024. And mostly prices then, retail prices went down by a bit or up by a very small amount, not very much. So we're now in a situation where, depending on what baseline you choose, if you choose a year, then you could say prices have come down. If you choose 3 or 4 years, you could say, look, prices have gone up. And it's because of the smoothing out of these fluctuations, some of which are associated with the cost of what we're doing, some of which are to do with the challenges of the existing system and the nature of the weather impacts on our system.
Yeah, absolutely. The nature of the weather impacts, absolutely. And you can't discount the wars in Parliament over climate change and what to do with it over the last 2 decades, really. And that, you can blame both sides of politics for having a lack of bipartisanship that's got us to this system now. But if I could ask you one final question about price, because Albanese promised that electricity prices would go down on 2021 levels on the average bill by 2025. So $275. Electricity bills increased between December 2021 and May 2024 from about $1,600 to around $2,000. That was a rise in about 21%. So I put to Chris Bowen again, he's a very good politician. So he said, he remains that is his commitment. But is there any chance of us getting $275 off our bills of around $1,600? So let's put it this way. Is there any chance that we're going to go back to having $1,300 on average annual power bills?
Look, there's a chance we might find out there's still some Tasmanian tigers out there. But I think, I'm not trying to be too facetious, honestly, because in most political advisors I suspect, so Humphrey would have said this, Minister or Prime Minister, that would be a very brave projection to make. And I was surprised, to be honest, that the government stuck to that projection when it became pretty obvious that things out of their control, things like the Ukraine war, were having an impact on electricity prices in Australia. And so, I think the idea that you can doggedly stick to that. Now, is it an objective to make sure that we have the lowest cost pathway to reducing emissions? Absolutely right. But unfortunately, instead of saying, look, our objective is to get your prices down, and we think it's possible, given our current numbers, to do that, when the numbers change, as someone wisely said, of course you have to change your view, but that's a difficult political shift to make. So I think the minister's right to say, look, we are doing everything we can. We are making progress on reducing emissions. We are making progress on keeping costs under control. But we are, the idea that we are going to achieve the $275 saving, I think, is something that they could much better have communicated as being, yes, aspirationally desirable, but almost certainly practical, no longer achievable.
So, long and short of it, Tony, we should get used to $500 a quarter on average for the average household.
I think we're going to see in where we are now and where we're likely to be. This summer could get quite nasty, right? We've already seen what it could look like. So we could see some nasty shocks, and those costs will flow through to prices next year. On the other hand, I think that we won't see in the longer term, medium to longer term, I don't think we're going to see significant increases or decreases in prices. I think maintaining prices roughly where they are now is about the sort of thing we're going to see as we continue to make this transition.
Okay, Tony, thanks so much. The lights have gone out where you are. I don't know, is that got to do with anything? Bit prophetic
I think it's
there.
I haven't paid my electricity bill at Grattan.
Okay, well, we'll let you get on and do that. Tony, wonderful end. Thanks so much. That was perfect.